Damn, Alakazam. I make you feel
It's so funny. That part of the song is like stuck in my head now because it's just so funny. Bam, Alakazam. So stupid. I love it. Hi everyone, I'm back to talk about Bridgerton. We have talked about season 2 and season 1. I have, voiced my opinions previously on this show. If you want to see it, I'm gonna link it somewhere. Today we're gonna be focusing on season 3. The amount of people I've seen being upset about Penelope having more options, more prospects than they do is ridiculous. And it's like, I've heard a lot of people who just like call anyone pretty. That's totally fine. I don't really have like very strong opinions on people's looks most of the time unless I dislike them as people, and then I will come up with something to dislike about their looks. It doesn't matter whether they're goddamn Aphrodite. I will come up with something if I think that they're a nasty person. So many opinions about Penelope. Nicola is low-key gorgeous, and this is not me trying to be someone who again calls everyone pretty, as I've said. I don't particularly usually care to comment on that, but you have got to be serious. Just because she's not skinny does not mean that she's not beautiful. You can look at her face, and as people say, the face card did not decline. So I don't understand why people genuinely try to come up with reasons as to why she's not supposed to have as many prospects or something. Is just fucking ridiculous. But also, the funniest part about all of this, and again, none of us are watching Bridgerton for historical accuracy. Let's be real here. If you've ever read any books from 19th century, from 18th century, anywhere around that time, you know that none of those girls would have been that skinny in general, because it was not the beauty standard back then. Those people are so strange. Do you look at people in real life and go, why does this person like them? Who cares? Just why do you give a fuck? I don't understand. And it just honestly makes me sad for those people, because how much do you have to hate yourself that you look at someone who you perceive to be less attractive than you and be mad that they were treated like a person in a show? God, it's not fucking working. Not me using my nose to turn off a fucking alarm. Anyway, you need to be nicer to yourself, okay? And you need to be nicer to other people. But this is genuinely just showing me how many people are miserable with themselves, and for no fucking reason. I don't know what to tell you, but we're all gonna be dead soon enough. Don't worry about that. I can assure you that will happen, and it will happen really quickly. So you need to stop thinking about stupid shit like this. It just doesn't make any sense, honestly. Let's go bit by bit. First of all, if you're not familiar with the end of second season, honestly, you don't really need to know what happened before then. But our protagonist of this season, Penelope, heard Colin, the guy that she likes, say to all of his friends that he would never even dream of courting Penelope Featherington.
The way you were dancing with her looked rather interesting. You're courting the girl, Bridgerton.
Are you mad? I would never dream of courting Penelope Featherington.
Basically insinuating that she's not attractive enough, because the guys were kind of making fun of him when they assumed that he was, maybe courting her, which was honestly so rude, because I kind of had to choose to forget that happened for this season. Because if he would have said something like, oh no, you guys, I've always seen her as more of my sister, or something like that, it would have been just as heartbreaking. Well, not as heartbreaking, but it would have been heartbreaking for Penelope, but it wouldn't make him look like a complete dickhead. It would just show him as a person who didn't see her as someone to court, instead of showing him as a really mean kind of dude. Honestly, I just had to decide to forget about it, because I couldn't get over it. If I started thinking about it, I'm like, there's no going back from that, because what he insinuated in that situation wasn't just that he doesn't see her as someone he's into in terms of attraction, but it was also clearly insinuating that he doesn't value her as a person, doesn't see her as someone who would have her feelings hurt if he were to say something like this, or if anyone else would have said something like this about her, which just doesn't make any fucking sense. If I'm friends with a guy who I don't see as someone I'd be attracted to, it still doesn't mean that when I'm with my girlfriends and we're talking about it and they ask me about it, that I would start saying things like, obviously not that guy, because isn't he a friend to me? maybe if we would have been strangers, it would have been a different conversation. Maybe I would have had like a mean streak or something like that. Who knows? I can be sharp-tongued usually when it comes to people I know and I don't like, though. So this particular situation is just so cruel for no reason, and it shows him as like a bad friend, which I cannot forgive. I cannot forgive that in real life. I cannot forgive that in fiction. So I'm gonna tell you right away, I decided to forget it and block it out of my head entirely, because I don't think that there's going back from it, honestly. Could have been fixed if they just made him say that he doesn't see her as not family, like he sees her as his sister or something like that.
Oh, brother. He's like my little brother.
At least it would have been more respectful, even though it would have still been so heartbreaking for Penelope because she loves him, right? Put the situation aside, because otherwise there's like no point in genuinely talking about the entirety of this season, because there is no going back from it really. But we're just gonna blow past it and talk about the first episode and everything. So we've got Colin come back. They changed his look once again. I do see how they made him like look conventionally better. I think that them saying that it's because of his travels, whatever, makes sense. However, they did go a little bit too far with the filler for the guy. Like they changed his like facial structure slightly, and that's whatever. They did something somewhere in between, maybe in between his eyebrows or something, basically changing the range of movement in his face a little bit, which every time people do that, especially for actors, I'm like, girl, you can't do that shit with actors. Like, you just can't. If you put too much filler in their face, they just cannot act at all or as effectively, right? They kind of made his work a bit harder because of that. I think that he did a good job. I know that there's some people who will find faults with everything, but immediately in the first episode, he genuinely always starts like flirting with Penelope. Like, for example, when she leaves the party, he runs after her and then he's like, well, where are you going? Oh, Penelope, do you need me to say this? Like, oh, I missed you.
If you are going to make me say it out loud, I miss you.
You miss me.
And he says it with such a smug face too. Dude, it's insane, because like, how do you not remember saying something like this? Like, you know, like when you say something that you didn't mean, something that kind of comes out a bit harsher than you intended it to be. I feel like if he actually would have at least felt bad about what he said, he would have felt bad beforehand, before she brought it up. Like, he would have already been feeling kind of guilty. Like, he would at least remember that he said all that, right? But the funniest thing is that he gives her those like look, kind of like up and down look. It's so crazy. He can say all those things to those guys and then be completely baffled that Penelope would not believe him when he says that her dress is cute or that she looks nice. Okay, on her side, let's assume that she didn't hear that, right? She wouldn't know these things, but you know what you say to other people about her. What, do you think that people don't have like a feeling of whether you're kind of being a bit of a dick, you know? Like, for example, there's a couple of guys who pass by in that same scene and he gives them like a bit of a look as if he's a little ashamed.
Perhaps we should talk about this somewhere more private.
Because I embarrass you.
Dude, you just said all this and then you fall into your old pattern with those guys. I just don't understand, honestly. But I was pretty happy that they went with the whole I will help you find somebody type of shtick, because I personally do like that trope, not gonna lie. Like, it's usually fun, you know, it's usually funny. It leads to a lot of funny situations, and I do like my romance with a hefty spoonful of comedy, because otherwise it just doesn't feel earnest and real to me, at least. I was pretty happy with that. And yes, I know that a lot of people would want me to talk about the costuming, and generally speaking, Bridgerton is just so far removed from historical accuracy that there's no point in like discussing it at all. However, I do think that they did a really great job with Penelope this season. Her hair was looking fabulous. Her makeup was absolutely fantastic. The only makeup look that I was kind of meh about was the look where she was apologizing to the queen with the red lip. I thought that it was a bad idea to give that perfect line red lip to Nicola, but you know, I personally am not that much of a fan of perfect line red lip. Or honestly, maybe I don't like it at all in general. I feel like I like the blurred kind of edge look, but it might be because it's just like in right now. Maybe I'm just like being influenced, but I do love her makeup outside of that. I think that even red lip would have been great on her if they just, not too much of a gradient as much as just like having the edge a little bit more smooth than harsh and hard, you know? Nicola is honestly so pretty. It's kind of sickening and fucked up a little bit. Like, she's just got that doll look, you know what I mean? Just a literal doll. So cute. I really enjoyed all the outfits that she got. There were a couple that I didn't give a fuck about, but most of them, the dresses were gorgeous in the sense of like them actually like fitting her really well and the color being so fitting. And obviously, yes, I can comment on the color coding, but I mean, you're gonna have like 300 videos on Bridgerton talking about color coding in this season where they're going to say the most basic shit to you with a tone as if it's some kind of scientific discovery. And listen, it's just that she went from yellow and green to blue, and yellow, green, orange, a lot of citrus colors are Featherington colors, and blue colors are obviously Bridgerton colors. In color theory, if you put yellow and you put blue together, you get green. In a lot of the dresses that Penelope wore, especially before she became Bridgerton, she is wearing like a light turquoise color, which is blue-green, right? The closer that she gets to being a Bridgerton, the more blue she wears or whatever. She still wears green here and there, which I like because I do think that she needs to keep her identity as a Featherington as well, because even though, yeah, they can be too much, I think that honestly, their mother, and let's talk about her mother because this is the interesting shit, okay? Kasumi, yada yada yada, I will talk about it like here and there. I'll sprinkle it in a way that would make it more interesting instead of just regurgitating the same shit that everyone's gonna tell you on this goddamn website, okay? So first and foremost, Lady Featherington, Penelope's mother, we're gonna call her Lady Featherington. She is an interesting character because she's actually very realistic in a sense of her approach, and it seems like she's kind of very unsupportive and she's kind of mean or whatever. And there is definitely that, especially in the first season and especially in the way that she phrases her opinions or what she says to Penelope. But she honestly, I personally think she honestly genuinely cares about her kids and she genuinely cares about their well-being, and it makes sense for her considering that she knows that Colin last season kind of was a part of why her scheme got exposed and whatever. And I mean, it's not why her scheme and their uncle's scheme got exposed or whatever. I understand that she didn't do a good thing with that, but I understand why she also thinks that this is a guy that's not really particularly concerned with ruining her or ruining her family along her. Because considering how all of those guys are openly talking about the Featheringtons, about Penelope, the way that she's being talked about in the paper, in Lady Whistledown just recently, to me it makes sense that when Penelope all of a sudden shows up engaged to Colin, she's kind of skeptical. It makes sense that she's demanding more from Colin. Did he tell you that he loves you? Whatever, right? I think that it makes sense that all of this is involved because he did not come to ask for permission for her hand, right? He did not court her publicly. He also proposed so quickly without the public courting situation to the point where everyone immediately, at least Anthony, for example, immediately assumed that Colin was intimate with her. And that's why the engagement is so quick, rightfully so. Like, that's literally what happened. It makes sense that her mother is like, is he even serious about this or is he just playing around? Because it makes sense. I'm sorry, it does. Did she say it in a way that's too harsh and places the blame on Penelope and on her being silly or whatever? Yeah. But at the same time, if this wouldn't be Bridgerton, if it wouldn't be a show where the main guys, like the main like Bridgerton guys are not assholes, generally speaking, we wouldn't be as quick to just accept this type of behavior because it is so against all of their norms, right? To the point where you can understand that, for example, him proposing like this, generally speaking, can look suspicious. And I think it's reasonable to question that with Lady Featherington. It makes sense that she's like this because she did not get to have a love match. Not only that, but even her reasonable match wasn't great. And then when this whole uncle situation happened, he was also just using her. So it makes sense that she just generally speaking is skeptical and needs proof. And it is great that Colin, stood up for Penelope because Penelope did need that in that moment. But at the same time, it's like, well, there are questions to be asked and she has the right to ask them as a mother and as a person who knows that they don't have a male relative right now who can cover.
Come get a touch of magic. Damn. Bam, alakazam.
So in the first part, we got like a more of a cute development for them. And in the second part, obviously there was a lot of angst going on. I understand why he's pissed, but at the same time, I'm glad that they addressed the fact that it was clearly envy. Because I definitely felt like it wasn't really fair the way that he was treating Penelope. And also the fact that this is the most disappointing part, I guess, about interaction with people. And especially the fact that this interaction between genders, you know, is always running into the problem of being around people who, and by people I mean men, who haven't thought about even the most glaring issues in society when it comes to your plight, right? If I were to date somebody who is experiencing some kind of discrimination in society, and then when I would be talking to them, they would be running into the issue of me never actually thinking prior the relationship about the issues that affect them, especially the most, like, the biggest issues, right? Like, not the specifics of the experience that only the person who experiences it can know, but this, where Penelope is talking to Colin and he doesn't understand how much of a feat it is to be Lady Whistledown, to make that much money, to have that much power while you're not the queen and you are a woman in that society. It is extremely disappointing to see how that thought, not only did it not cross his mind previously that he's also a guy who lived and grew up with Eloise and hears constantly those opinions, and still they don't even scratch at his heart even a little bit. Like, I would honestly say that if someone who is like not white wouldn't want to date me as a white person, for example, because I could not give two shits about their experience in society, like I couldn't give two shits about the prejudice that affects them, the systemic inequality that affects them, I think to me that would make sense if they wouldn't want to do that. But we have set it up in society in a way that half of the population doesn't give a flying fuck about the other half of the population, even though they're supposed to pair up with them. They're supposed to be their support system. They're supposed to be the people who are there for them to also live a fulfilling life, right? And I just don't understand how this is a thing that we're supposed to be constantly like addressing and talking about. I hear people around me talking to their partners or whatever. I hear them talk about the most like basic shit, like for example, girl being kind of like, well, taking care of the house is not something you help with. This is something that you do, both of you do to an equal degree. It's not something that you're supposed to be just helping with because this is your house as well. Same with children. You don't help with your children. You actually should be a parent and do your job individually. And the fact that this is even a conversation is disappointing to a degree that honestly should make all of us not want to interact with the other gender at all. And yeah, I mean women interacting with men, because fucking obviously Penelope is sure better than me, because I would have immediately been like, what is this about? Because I don't think you're saying everything. Because when he found out about Lady Whistledown, her being Lady Whistledown, it felt right away that it was like an issue of writing and the fact that she's successful at it and he isn't. Well, he hasn't even released anything yet, so why is he pressed? I don't know. I know a lot of people were saying that they did not like the sex scene. I'm gonna be honest with you, every single time I watch a season of Bridgerton, I swear to God, you guys, every time I forget how explicit it is. It's just such a long time in between seasons that I forget what is the norm in the show, so I kind of go back to the default level of how explicit I expect a show that it's this popular to be, and then they just like completely get undressed and I'm like, oh, I forgot. I think it was fine. I don't think I have that many like strong feelings about scenes like this. It was okay. It was there. I didn't think it was bad. However, again, just pissed me off. I was literally had to like take off my glasses for a moment there, take a breather, because she like tells him like, I hope I was okay for you, or like whatever the hell she said. Oh, I know that you're more experienced than me. Yeah, because all of those men, they be fucking, and that's so annoying to me. Like, genuinely pissed me off so much I had to take off my glasses and just like stare into the distance without seeing anything for a few moments, like just staring into the abyss. Because the fact that this is just the world that people were living in, and like we're still living in that world. I hate everything so much, it's not even funny. Watching this show sometimes is such a frustrating thing, not even because of the whole like issues of women, whatever, no, but because of how this is supposed to be a fantasy, yet it's like always, you know, it's just like soaked in all the issues that we're constantly dealing with. And on top of that, let's talk about the race situation. So they try to tackle it they tried to tackle the race issue in Queen Charlotte. This is an offshoot season of Bridgerton that is basically the love story of the queen and the king, okay? And the way that they explain how it like got changed, the reason for it was, oh, the queen and king, they fell in love and they resolved it. This is the way that Lady Danbury explains it in like season 1 or something. Like she insinuates it to Simon. I completely forgot that she even said that for a while. I just thought Bridgerton creators said that this is a fantasy kind of dimension. We're not supposed to look for historical accuracy, so why the fuck not have all the races mixed, right? I think this is a good explanation for a show of this depth and this caliber, because when they tried to explain it otherwise in Queen Charlotte, they basically were like, we're just gonna throw a party and this is gonna be the end of racism. We're gonna mix different races into the aristocracy. Bridgerton is a perfect metaphor for neoliberalism. This is the wet dream of the West when it comes to solving issues that people think are fair issues to solve. By that I mean people thinking that exploitation does not matter if it's not based on race, which, well, exploitation and race go hand in hand in our world. You cannot just erase it. You can't just say that it did not exist there, right? So before, when it was a fantasy world and they did not have a reason as to why things were the way that they were, at the very least, they weren't trying to pretend like giving titles to people of different races would have basically made racism obsolete. That's literally just... Let me quickly explain to you. So we've got the aristocracy, a family like Bridgerton. Let's say there's like 20 Bridgertons and none of them actually do any work. They throw parties, they become viscountesses and viscounts, and it counts as work, just the fact that they sign checks and like sign papers and they assign money to be spent for a ball or whatever. This is their job, okay? It's basically non-existent type of labor. It's just performative and it is more entertainment, the planning parts of entertainment, than it is anything else. The Bridgertons somehow need to be fed, dressed, the house needs to be cleaned, food needs to grow, it needs to be harvested, it needs to be prepared. So many things need to be done for the Bridgertons to live the life that we see them live in this show. They basically do nothing all day, get like really dramatic about things. In the real world, this class dynamic was also racialized. So for example, what happened in America, you had families like Bridgertons and you had people working for them, nameless people in this show, working for Bridgertons. Their labor, all of their labor, all of the money that they made was going to Bridgertons. So the money is being made, it's given to Bridgertons. Values being made, given to Bridgertons. Food's being made, it's given to Bridgertons. The people that work for Bridgertons actually belong to Bridgertons. They're like property, basically. They cannot just quit and go to work somewhere else. That's how it was, for example, in Russian aristocracy when slavery was a thing. The aristocratic class owned everyone else. I'm sure it was also racialized in some places because of like population being more diverse in some areas than others. You get abolishment of slavery, which means that people do not literally belong. They're not literal property of Bridgertons. However, Bridgertons and Featheringtons and the Cowpers and whatever, all of them have been collecting that money and that labor for centuries from those people. So those people were barely getting anything out of their labor for centuries, for generations. So they don't have any generational wealth to give to the next generation. So this money that all the Bridgertons have, when slavery ended, they said, well, now you don't belong to us. Now we're on equal footing. Would you say that it's equal footing where these people have all the shit that these people's ancestors were working for and creating? Their labor created all this. A portion of it, let's say, a little portion of it was created by them just fucking around and like buying bonds or some bullshit. Let's say that's the way that they made it, whatever. Everyone else, on the other hand, they basically have 1 grain of rice when Bridgertons have tons and tons and tons and tons of it, right? So they are the ones who have the purchasing power now. And in this dynamic, even though these people do not technically belong to these people, the Bridgertons are friends with the Featheringtons and they're friends with the Cowpers and they're friends with the Ton. They're friends with all of them. And it's in their interest interest because they're interested only in their own interests, to keep what they have and to make sure that they do not undercut each other. So if one of the people who are not their slaves anymore wants to go work for somebody else, that somebody else is also going to be who? One of the people from the town. You cannot have these people work for someone who do not have the means to pay them. And who has the means? People who have been collecting it for all the eternity. And if they go and they try to work for someone else, it's going to piss off all of those people because they want to have the control of the market. This was the issue between the first and second revolution in Russia, for example. At first, yes, we ended slavery and everyone was like, okay, so now I'm a free man, but I can't work for somebody else because they're gonna get pissed at me that I'm jumping ship. They're not gonna be happy that I'm doing this. They're also not going to be interested in giving me anything more than just the bare minimum of what I need to survive and nothing more. Not even to live well, just survive, just like not die, basically. So it's technically still the same in terms of the way that they lived in slavery. Yes, technically, on paper, you don't belong to them, but in actuality, in practicality, in the way that you're existing, you still do. It's quite similar to the immigrant experience that all the people around them were living like they had a life before. So their education counted. The money that they've made was theirs. But obviously they also grabbed all the other people's money and whatever. However, they were basically at zero, even though they have been working their whole lives. Their parents have been working their whole lives. Their grandparents have been working their whole lives. They don't get anything to compare to all the Bridgertons around. So trying to tackle race in Bridgerton without acknowledging the reality of what racism is. It's not just someone disliking someone. It's not just that. But this is the reality of what prejudice does. It affects people in real ways. That's why it's bad. You can't just eliminate the opticality, the optical just conversation between people, but still keep the entire system intact. Have all the money where it was collected in the Bridgerton's house and have equality. Do you understand? In the second revolution, the second Russian revolution in 1917, they were like, okay, we were slaves and you owned us. It was like from 80 to 90%. Now we don't belong to you, but we're still in the same situation because you have all this shit and you still control our lives entirely, because this is how it works. If you have the money and the things in the market, you're going to be controlling the situation. So all the peasants said, that's not fucking fair. That's not what we signed up for. What's the point of abolishing slavery if we're not abolishing slavery? Like, this is not what it means. So that's what they did. They redistributed the wealth to people. If you're wondering, well, Lisa, they obviously cannot do that in Bridgerton. They can't just abolish aristocracy, yada yada yada. Trying to tackle racism in a show like Bridgerton is basically, honestly, insane. It makes no sense. I think they should have been in their lane. They should have stuck to their little pretty dresses, their horrible jewelry. I don't know why they always pick the worst jewelry to do zoom-ins on, because you can see the way that the stones are set in the metal and stuff like that, how cheap that jewelry is. It's like, why are you zooming in on it? Girl, what's the point? What's the point of doing all that? From afar, it sparkles, sure. But up close, girl, that doesn't work. They can have their silly little situations where it's like, we're proving ourselves to the queen. She comes in and she's unimpressed with how much money was spent on this party. But then we show off a party trick that cost an arm and a leg, and now we are accepted in this society. And this is a slay, and everyone should give a fuck, you know? This is how shallow this show is. And this is how it should be. You're basically a glorified fanfic, and that's how you should be, because that's your whole entire point, is to be entertaining. Tackling race, especially by being like, love solved it between the queen and the king, and we just threw a party and we solved it. You cannot talk about one without the other. It's kind of like, obviously it's not all the same thing, because I heard one of the people in my comment section at one point were like, Lisa, we shouldn't be conflating race and class and other things like that, which is true, but they are connected. All of this shit is connected, okay? All exploitation is connected in one way or another. That's why you gotta know who's your pal, okay? Instead of thinking about superficial things. There are billionaires who are gonna look like you, and there are people of your class who are not going to look like you. Do you understand? People who are aware and people who are not aware, even though they look like you and had the same experience as you, which is crazy because I never understand that. That's absolutely insane, but whatever. The experience of class is kind of like Penelope's yellow dresses, okay? And the experience of race is kind of like Bridgerton's blue dresses. But a person who is both is going to experience a green dress. Do you understand? Like, it's a different dress. It's a different color, but the components. Do you understand? Do you get it? Color theory, bitch. Let's get back to the silly nonsense stuff of Bridgerton, because the thing is, there's gonna be so many people who are gonna be pissed at me in the comments because there's so many like rabid Bridgerton fans, I swear to God, who are like pissed at anyone who's not super skinny, pissed at anyone who isn't white, pissed at anyone who isn't straight. It's like, why do you give a fuck? Why do you give a fuck about anything? When people are this annoying, it's like, girl, how are you alive? Whatever. I felt for Cressida in this season. I was surprised that they didn't just put Cressida and Lord Debling together, because they were like in cahoots. They were kind of fucking with each other. Cressida doesn't like her family, he doesn't like his family. They were kind of bonding over that, and I was so surprised that in the second part of the season they were not together, and they used Cressida to come out as like Whistledown, right? And I thought that they were gonna use her as like a scapegoat basically, and just kind of have Penelope move on. And I was like, I don't think I like that, because the Whistledown is too much a part of her life, that she's really proud of, and I don't think it would be fair to just like give it up for a boy, you know? At the same time, they literally used Cressida for this plot line, but that plot line never actually went anywhere. They literally have Penelope come forward later on, and I just cannot understand why they had to ruin Cressida, because I feel like it was quite interesting actually to show her go against her family and what she knew, her mom teaching her that all women are your competition and are not to be trusted and you cannot be friends with anyone and yada yada yada. I thought it was actually interesting to have Cressida go in a different direction and show her humanity, and show that Eloise assumed that she would spread that rumor, and she didn't, because her and Eloise were actual friends, to show this kind of side of her and actually stick to it, because they completely reversed it immediately in the second part, and for nothing. I genuinely don't understand what the fuck that was. At first I thought they were gonna actually use it. What the hell was that? I understand that there's like people who are like, well, it's realistic that it didn't work out or whatever. Who gives a fuck? That's Bridgerton. First of all, it shouldn't be realistic, and I've said that just right now. I went on a whole tangent as to why they shouldn't be getting into situations they cannot write about, because they are too shallow for it. And it's fine that they are. You're an entertainment show, you're not an art piece. It's fine. She was fitting his whole thing, you know, like, and he was kind of fitting her. But at the same time, I think that she's being taken by her aunt somewhere really far away, where there's like literally nothing going on, just a house in the middle of nowhere. I have a feeling that she's probably going to reconnect with Debling because of that. I feel like that's my opinion. But this is also the reason why this whole conversation of why they shouldn't have been getting themselves into the race conversation is the same reason why I thought it actually made sense that with Eloise they stepped away from her activism and stuff like that, because it doesn't fucking work. It doesn't. You would have to genuinely solve issues for it to feel like there's a progression in some kind of way, right? But they don't want to solve those issues, because the people who are writing that show clearly subscribe to this neoliberal idea of how the world is supposed to work, that people who are poor are just like stupid or lazy or whatever. Like, they want to go on with that idea, and if you do want to go on with that idea, you can't have Eloise be an activist, because she's going to be the worst one imaginable. She's going to be literally Taylor Swift light, basically. Just using lines about feminism only when it serves her and be on her merry way, which will make her extremely unlikable for anyone with half a brain in our day and age. Girl, I don't know. Basically, I thought it was a good idea that they step away from it. And then at the end of this season, they bring it back with her talking to her brother. I honestly keep on forgetting his name, and in my notes I wrote the art brother. Benedict. Benedict. So they talked about it and whatever, and she's like, well, if I want to change the world, I need to at first see it. And it's like, girl, I don't think it's gonna help you, honestly. It's not gonna help the writers either, I think. But what are they supposed to do? This is too silly of a show to be doing all that. Do you know what I mean? You guys are silly. You can't claim to be more than you actually are. It's just not going to work. Violet said to Francesca that Francesca is so brave or whatever, and I'm like, Since when? What are we talking about? What are we doing here, guys? Like, sometimes I just do not understand why they just be yapping, just saying whatever. Just don't say anything, just be like, I love you. Next scene. I did like the carriage scene, but the music was so stupid, it like made me burst out loud laughing.
Feelings like dreaming of you when I'm asleep, and in fact preferring sleep because that is where I might find you.
Face.
Well, I do mean it.
Was watching this show at like 2 a.m. or something like that. I just could not keep it in, even though I don't live alone, so I don't want to be waking everybody up. Girl, it was so silly. It was so stupid. I had to laugh. But this is what I come for when it comes to Bridgerton. I come for the giggles. I come for the little you know, like kind of like when Benedict was talking to that guy on the balcony, and the guy's like, well, when you're drunk you're also kind of charming. And I was like, ooh. He said what? But don't get me wrong, I skipped that whole storyline. I mean, like I was light skipping, by which I mean that I was skipping every 15 seconds so I could get the gist, but I don't have to actually watch it because it was so boring. No offense, Benedict, but like you just be fucking every single season and it's cool. Now what? Like, how is that my problem? There was one phrase that I really liked when Benedict was talking to Eloise, and Eloise actually cried at Penelope's and Colin's wedding. Benedict was like, oh, I saw you crying, whatever. And she was like, oh, no, what the fuck? And he was like, love is not finite, Eloise. And I was like, that really hit, actually, because they're kind of addressing the whole thing with how Eloise feels she is losing everyone to marriage, which makes a lot of sense, because like honestly the way that people are about relationships, it makes sense that people are acting like this, because it's a very selfish approach, especially in the Western world. Maybe it's everywhere like that, bitch. I don't know. I'm not an expert on all the cultures, okay? But there's definitely this selfish, individualistic, and family unit kind of approach where when the new family unit forms, Colin and Penelope, for example, the person who is literally like, Colin was her best friend and Penelope was her best friend, and now they're gonna be together, they're gonna be freaks about it. You know what I mean? It totally makes sense. I'm like, yeah, honestly, girl, I get it. Especially when like that's all there is. That's such a disgusting existence, honestly. Like, I feel for them. Girl, I shoot myself. Anyway, oh yeah, Francesca. I didn't give a fuck about that whole storyline. It was way too quick, and it's so funny when Violet was like, I thought that love was just like this woof experience, and I think you showed me that there's beauty in a slow approach, bitch. They literally got married so fucking quickly. She met that guy a lot later than Colin and Penelope met each other, or obviously they did because they were friends forever, but they met each other, got engaged almost immediately, and it was very much boring as balls. I get why Violet was kind of like, you know, yeah, Violet, I fucking get it. Like, I mean, Violet is kind of annoying about all this. I am not like her at all, but she has a point. Like, put on the show, bitch. Like, you do it only once in that time, so maybe put your whole Franchusi in it. Francescusi. Anthony and Kate are great. It's kind of funny. Penelope is a real one for not giving up writing. She is a real one for being like, yeah, I don't give a fuck. Like, you can honestly annul the whole thing. I get it. Okay, yeah, I've said some shit before. I take responsibility for it, so you can annul this whole thing if you want to, girl. But they figured it out. It's all cute. I thought this season wasn't bad. Also, Francesca apparently is like at least bi or some shit like that at the end of the episodes. That's what we find out. I think that's what they insinuated with her meeting a cousin of her husband. I thought it was really strange that there's 3 babies at the end of this season, but I am not a baby person, so I do not know whether they are like, if they look different ages, because the thing is, there's 3 kids, okay? So 2 of her sisters were already pregnant, and then I guess Penelope also got pregnant fucking immediately or whatever, or something, after she got married, I assume. But wouldn't the baby still be smaller? Is it smaller? Are they different ages? Do they look like different ages? My uneducated ass was like, 3 babies, the fuck? How did they all look kind of the same level of baldness? That seems to me like the same age of a baby. Or maybe those babies had COVID. They just have a little alopecia right now. Who knows? I was confused. Let me know Are those baby the same age? I'm excited for Benedict to have his season. However, I like need him to figure himself out because I am not watching another season of him just like fucking around. Like, it's so boring. I cannot deal. Like, yeah, they be fucking. Now what? I'm bored, bitch. Give me angst. Their dresses are kind of hit or miss, but when they hit, they hit. Kate's dress that looked like inspired by Asari ate that up. She ate that up. It's fucked up, actually. That actress, I'm telling you, I've said it last time and I'm gonna say it again. She's too pretty for me to ever believe that in the first season, those men weren't literally just like dropping dead as soon as she would just give them one glance. That facial structure, are you serious? Are you serious? Whatever. But Penelope looked stunning. The hair, the everything. I also love that they did that whole thing with a dream where I guess that everyone was kind of thinking that it was her dream. I was kind of expecting that they were going to show it as like both of their dreams, kind of like, oh, they both like wake up and they're like, oh my god. But they did it with him, showing that he was kind of flustered by that whole situation, which I think is very fair. Nicola is just like, she just got that something. When people were like criticizing or saying like, oh my god, how does she have so many prospects? Girl, have you seen her face? Yeah. When people were like, there were too many side stories, it was the same amount. I was skipping the same amount. I'm pretty sure it's the same amount of side stories. If you're gonna go and watch season 2, you're also gonna be bored as balls and like skipping most of it. Yeah, don't lie to me. Let me know what you think. Maybe if it turns out that I forgot a bunch of shit and that these notes were not extensive enough, this is the last page of the notes, maybe I forgot something that I wanted to say, because there's obviously a lot to say. You can analyze every single character for the rest of time, but I had fun watching it. Fun for a one-time watch or a two-time watch if you're watching it a second time with someone else. Have a good day, guys, and bye.